The veteran's warning. The young cadets laughed as they gathered in the training hall of the Valorian Military Academy, their purple scales gleaming under the bright lights above them. They were the finest students from across the Empire, selected for their strength and intelligence and courage, and they believed themselves ready for anything the galaxy could offer them. But today, they would learn how wrong they were. Commander Thex stood at the front of the hall and raised one of his forearms to silence them, his voice cutting through their noise like a blade through flesh. "Silence," he commanded, and the room went quiet at once. "Today you will hear from a warrior who has seen more battles than any of you can imagine. And he carries lessons you must learn if you wish to survive." The cadets straightened in their seats as an old soldier walked slowly into the hall, and gasps escaped from several of them when they saw him clearly. His name was Crixville, and he was missing his left arm entirely, the empty sleeve of his uniform pinned to his shoulder with military precision. Deep scars ran across his face and neck, the marks of wounds that should have killed him, and his remaining 3 eyes held a darkness that made even the boldest cadets look away. He wore more medals than any soldier they had ever seen, decorations from a dozen campaigns across the stars, yet he moved like a creature that expected danger from every shadow. "I am here to teach you about the humans," Crixville said, his voice rough and low, and the cadets immediately relaxed. Laughter rippled through the room once more. "The humans," one cadet named Rex called out with amusement in his voice. "Those soft little creatures from the tiny world called Earth." More laughter followed, and cadets exchanged looks of disbelief that such a decorated veteran would waste their time discussing such insignificant beings. "They are barely half our size," another cadet added. "They have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons at all. I heard they need to sleep for 8 hours every single rotation," a third cadet said with clear contempt. "How do they accomplish anything?" Crixville stood perfectly still as the laughter continued, and he waited with a patience that seemed unnatural for a warrior of his reputation. When the noise finally died down, he spoke again, and his words fell upon the room like ice. "I lost my arm to humans," he said simply. "I watched 200 of our finest warriors enter a single station to fight 12 humans. And I watched 140 of those warriors die screaming in the darkness." The laughter stopped completely. "I have fought the Krethic swarm and survived," Crixville continued. "I have faced the silicon beasts of the Outer Rim and walked away. I have battled enemies that would haunt your dreams for a lifetime. But nothing has ever terrified me the way humans do." He began to walk slowly among the seated cadets, and none of them could meet his gaze. "Let me tell you about the Battle of Nexus Station," he said. "Let me tell you how I learned the first rule of fighting humans." The cadets leaned forward despite their fear, drawn into his words by the weight of genuine horror in his voice. "We tracked a human squad to an abandoned mining station in the Nexus system," Crixville explained. "Our intelligence told us there were only 12 of them, and we brought 200 soldiers because we believed in overwhelming force." He paused beside a young cadet who had been laughing loudest, and he looked down at her with something like pity in his eyes. "We cornered them in the central hub," he continued. "We blocked every exit and surrounded them completely, and we demanded their surrender through the communication system." "Did they fight?" the young cadet asked, her voice barely a whisper now. "They laughed," Crixville answered. "Their squad leader, a female named Sergeant Park Guillain, responded to our surrender demand with laughter, and then she said words I will never forget." He straightened and addressed the entire room. She said, "Thank you for saving us the trouble of hunting you down." The cadets exchanged confused looks, unable to understand how 12 soldiers facing 200 could speak with such confidence. "We thought they were insane," Crixville admitted. "We thought fear had broken their minds, so we moved in to capture them quickly and end the engagement." He held up his remaining arm and examined it as though remembering the one he had lost. "That was when the lights went out. he said. That was when the screaming started. And that was when I learned something to change my understanding of the galaxy forever. He turned to face the cadets directly, his scarred face grim and haunted. Humans are never truly cornered, he declared. They simply decide when to stop retreating. And when a human stops retreating, something far worse begins. The training hall was completely silent now, every cadet frozen in place by the veteran's words. The next time we saw those humans clearly was 3 days later, Crixville said. 3 days of darkness and death. 3 days of being hunted through corridors we thought we controlled. He moved back toward the front of the room, his steps slow and heavy with memory. I will tell you what happened in those 3 days, he promised. I will tell you about Sergeant Park and her squad, and I will teach you why the Valorian Empire eventually chose to make peace with humanity. He looked out at the young faces before him, seeing his own youth reflected in their innocence. By the time I finish, he warned them, you will understand why I still wake screaming in the night, and why I pray you never face humans in battle. The cadets sat in terrified silence, and Crixville began his tale. They don't stop. The darkness inside Nexer Station was absolute when the humans killed the power, and Crixville remembered the feeling of cold terror that gripped his hearts in that moment. 200 Valorian warriors stood frozen in the blackness, their advanced sensors suddenly useless, their formation broken by confusion and fear. Activate emergency lighting, Commander Zorath had ordered, his voice steady despite the situation. They are only 12 weak creatures against our might. Red emergency lights flickered to life along the corridors, casting everything in a blood-colored glow that created shadows everywhere they looked. And the humans were already gone. They split into pairs, Crixville explained to the cadets, his voice heavy with the memory. 12 soldiers became 6 ghost teams that vanished into the maintenance tunnels and ventilation systems, and they began to hunt us. He paused to let that word settle upon his audience. Yes, he confirmed. I said they hunted us, not the other way around. The first deaths came within minutes. A patrol of 10 Valorians moved down a side corridor to secure an access point, and their communications simply went silent without warning. When reinforcements arrived, they found all 10 soldiers dead, killed so quickly and quietly that none of them had time to fire a single shot. How? A cadet asked with horror in her voice. How could they kill 10 armed warriors without any of them calling for help? Because humans are patient predators, Crixville answered. They waited in the darkness above the ceiling panels until the patrol passed beneath them, and then they dropped down like silent death. Commander Zorath ordered the troops to stay together in large groups, believing that numbers would protect them from the human attacks. But the humans adapted instantly. They set traps throughout the station, using materials they scavenged from storage rooms and maintenance closets. Explosives hidden in doorways, tripwires connected to gas canisters, false signals that led patrols into ambush points where human weapons waited in the shadows. We lost 30 soldiers in the first 6 hours, Crixville continued, and we had not even confirmed a single human casualty in that time. The psychological attacks were somehow worse than the physical ones. The humans would whisper through the communication systems, their voices echoing through the station without any way to trace the source. They would call out the names of soldiers they had killed, describing exactly how each one had died, and they would promise that more deaths were coming soon. They knew our names, Crixville said, with a shudder that passed through his entire body. They learned them from the identification tags on our dead, and they used them to terrify us. But the most terrifying presence on that station was Sergeant Park Geon herself. She seemed to be everywhere at once, a small human female with dark hair and eyes that held no fear whatsoever. Crixville first saw her clearly on the second day of the battle, when she ambushed his squad in a cargo bay. She was covered in blood and dirt, he remembered. She had not slept in 2 days. I could see wounds on her arms and legs from earlier fighting, but she moved like a predator that felt no pain. Park killed 3 soldiers before anyone could react, her rifle firing with perfect accuracy in the dim red light. When Crixville raised his weapon to shoot her, she was already gone, vanishing into a ventilation shaft too small for any Valorian to follow. I thought she was wounded badly enough to slow her down, Crixville admitted. I was wrong. 4 hours later, she attacked again, this time rescuing a wounded human soldier who had been captured by Valorian forces. Crixville witnessed the rescue from across a wide corridor, watching in disbelief as Park fought through 8 soldiers to reach her fallen comrade. She dragged the wounded human with one arm while firing her weapon with the other, her face set in grim determination that seemed to ignore the impossible odds against her. She took 4 more wounds during that rescue, Crixville said. 4 wounds that would have stopped any Valorian soldier cold, and she kept fighting without pause. By the 3rd day, the Valorian forces were broken in spirit and desperate to escape. Commander Zorath ordered a full retreat to the docking bay, hoping to evacuate whatever soldiers remained and abandon the cursed station forever. But the humans were waiting for them there too. They had rigged the docking bay with traps and positioned themselves in elevated positions that gave them perfect firing lines. The retreat became a massacre. I lost my arm in that final battle, Crixville told the cadets, his voice quiet now. Sergeant Park shot me 3 times as I tried to drag a wounded friend to safety. He looked down at his empty sleeve with an expression that mixed horror with something that might have been respect. She could have killed me, he admitted. Her aim was perfect, and I was an easy target. But she shot to wound instead of kill, and I have never understood why. When the fighting finally ended, only 60 Valorian soldiers remained alive from the original 200. The humans had lost 4 of their 12, and they had still completed their original mission of destroying the station's data core. How? A cadet asked with complete bewilderment. How did so few defeat so many of our warriors? Crixville looked at the young soldier with eyes that had seen too much death and suffering. Because humans do not fight to survive, he answered. They fight to win, and there is a difference you will only understand when it is too late. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. Survival means staying alive at any cost, he explained. Winning means achieving your objective, regardless of personal cost. And humans will sacrifice everything, including themselves, to achieve victory. The cadets sat in stunned silence, their earlier confidence completely destroyed by the tale they had just heard. But that was only my first encounter with humans, Crixville continued. Let me tell you about what happened on Harvest Moon 7. And let me teach you what humans become when you threaten something they love. The old veteran's face grew even darker with memory, and several cadets wished they could leave the room before hearing what came next. The thing they protectrix moved to the center of the training hall and stood very still, gathering his thoughts before continuing his tale. Nexus Station taught me that humans were dangerous fighters, he said, but Harvest Moon 7 taught me something far more important about their nature. The cadets leaned forward in their seats, drawn deeper into the veteran's dark memories. Harvest Moon 7 was a small agricultural colony on the edge of human space. Crixville explained. It had no military presence, no defensive weapons, no strategic value whatsoever. He let out a long breath that carried the weight of regret. High Command believed it would be an easy target to demonstrate our power, he continued. They sent 300 soldiers to capture the colony and use its civilians as bargaining tools against the human government. The plan had seemed so simple and foolproof to the officers who designed it. Land at dawn, secure the population center, capture the colonists without resistance, and broadcast demands to the human leadership. We expected farmers and scientists, Crixville said. We expected frightened civilians who would surrender immediately when they saw our weapons and armor. His remaining hand closed into a tight fist at his side. We did not expect what we found instead. The Valorian forces landed at sunrise, their dropships touching down in the fields surrounding the main settlement. They advanced in perfect formation toward the colony buildings, confident and proud in their military might. And then they saw the humans waiting for them. Every adult in the colony stood at the perimeter, Crixville remembered. Teachers, farmers, engineers, doctors, every single one of them holding whatever weapon they could find. Some held hunting rifles meant for controlling wildlife on the colony. Others carried tools converted into crude but deadly weapons. A few held nothing but farming equipment, pitchforks and shovels and heavy cutting blades. Behind them stood the children, Crixville said, and his voice grew soft with an emotion the cadets could not identify. Hundreds of human children of all ages, watching their parents prepare to fight impossible odds. Commander Vreth had ordered the colonists to surrender, promising that no harm would come to them if they laid down their weapons. A tall human male had stepped forward from the line, a simple farmer with dirt on his hands and steel in his eyes. His name was Yoon Tae-sung, Crixville told the cadets, and his response to our surrender demand still haunts me to this day. Yoon had looked at the hundreds of armed Valorian soldiers, and then he had looked back at the children behind him. He said, "You will have to kill every single one of us first." The battle began moments later. The humans had no training, no proper weapons, no armor, and no chance of victory against professional soldiers. But they fought anyway. They fought with a fury I have never seen before or since, Crixville admitted. Every human who fell was replaced by another. Every position we took was contested with blood and sacrifice. Teachers who had never held weapons became deadly snipers, using hunting rifles with surprising accuracy. Engineers constructed traps and explosive devices from agricultural chemicals and farming equipment. Doctors treated the wounded while the fighting raged around them, refusing to abandon anyone who could still be saved. But the true hero of that battle was Yoon Tae-sung, Crixville said. Evacuation ships arrived to rescue the children, landing at a pad on the far side of the colony. But to reach those ships, the children had to cross a bridge over a deep ravine, and Valorian forces were moving to cut them off. Yoon Tae-sung ran to that bridge alone. He stood at the center of the bridge with nothing but a hunting rifle and a pistol, Crixville told the stunned cadets, and he held that position for 9 hours while the children evacuated. The Valorian soldiers attacked the bridge again and again, wave after wave of trained warriors trying to push past a single human. Yoon was shot 11 times during those 9 hours. He did not fall. I watched him take wounds that should have killed any creature, Crixville said, and each time he stumbled, he looked back at the children still waiting to cross, and he found the strength to stand again. The last child crossed the bridge, just as the evacuation ships prepared to depart. Yoon finally allowed himself to collapse, his body broken beyond any hope of survival. Crixville had been the soldier who reached him first. I expected him to beg for mercy or curse me with his dying breath, the veteran admitted. Instead, he looked up at me with those strange human eyes, and he smiled. The cadets sat in complete silence, barely breathing. He thanked me, Crixville said, and his voice cracked slightly. He thanked me for being slow enough to let the last ship escape, and then he died with that smile still on his face. A cadet in the front row wiped tears from her eyes, unable to maintain her composure. I asked a human prisoner once why they fight so hard for their young, Crixville continued. She was a teacher named Kim Seo-yeon, who had killed 4 soldiers with an improvised blade before we captured her. He paused, remembering her words. She said, "Because they are tomorrow, because every child carries the hope of everything we might become, and because some things are worth dying for." Crixville looked at the young cadets before him, seeing them with new eyes. I did not understand then, he admitted. But I understand now that humans place their children above everything else. Above their own lives, above their own safety. above any calculation of victory or defeat. He moved slowly back toward the front of the room. And that is why threatening human children is the most dangerous thing any species can do, he warned. Because when you threaten what humans love most, you awaken something in them that has no mercy and no limits. The cadets exchanged frightened glances, sensing that the worst of the tale was still to come. Let me tell you now about what happens when humans stop holding back, Crixville said. Let me tell you about the silence and the 3 weeks that followed. The ragged Crixville stood in silence for a long moment, and the cadets could see a deep pain in his eyes that went beyond physical wounds. What I am about to tell you is not widely known, he said quietly. High Command buried this information to hide their shame, but every veteran who served in those days remembers the truth. He began to pace slowly, his steps heavy with the burden of memory. After our failures at Nexer Station and Harvest Moon 7, the admirals became desperate, he explained. They believed that a show of overwhelming force would break the humans and end the war quickly. The cadets watched him with growing dread, sensing that something terrible was coming. They ordered a demonstration strike on a civilian transport. Crixville said, a ship called the Morning Star that was carrying families to a new colony world. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. 3,000 humans died when our warships destroyed that vessel, including 400 children on an educational voyage to learn about space exploration. Gasps of horror echoed through the training hall. We expected outrage, Crixville continued. We expected threats and demands and diplomatic fury. We expected the humans to come screaming for revenge. He stopped pacing and faced the cadets directly. Instead, we received silence. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. No messages, no demands, no communication of any kind, Crixville explained. The humans simply stopped talking to us entirely, and their fleets withdrew from every contested zone without explanation. High Command celebrated this as a victory. They believed the demonstration had worked, that the humans had finally learned to fear Valorian might. But the veterans knew better, Crixville said grimly. We had seen what humans were capable of, and we knew that silence from them was not surrender. 3 weeks passed in that terrible quiet. Valorian forces advanced into empty space, claiming systems that humans had abandoned without a fight. The admirals made speeches about the weakness of humanity and the supremacy of the Empire. And then a single human ship appeared in the Valorian home system. It was a small vessel, Crixville remembered. Nothing that should have concerned a fleet of hundreds of warships, but something about its presence made everyone afraid. The ship broadcast a single message across all frequencies. Captain Choi Minho spoke with a voice that held no anger, no hatred, no emotion of any kind. You killed our children, he said. Now you will learn what humans become when mercy dies. The transmission ended, and the ship vanished into faster-than-light travel before anyone could respond. We did not understand the warning, Crixville admitted. We thought it was an empty threat from a defeated enemy. Within hours, the attacks began. Human fleets appeared without warning throughout Valorian space, striking military targets with precision and fury that defied everything the Empire knew about warfare. They used tactics they had forbidden themselves from using before, Crixville explained. Weapons and strategies that humans had created, but chosen never to deploy because they considered them too terrible. 5 military worlds went dark in 72 hours. Crixville had been stationed on one of those worlds, a fortress planet named Vethros Prime that was considered completely impregnable. I watched human soldiers fight with a coldness I had never seen from them before, he said. At Nexer Station, they had smiled and laughed even during battle. But on Vethros Prime, their faces were empty of all feeling. They moved through the fortress like machines, efficient and merciless in their advance. No wounded Valorians were left behind this time. No prisoners were taken. They did not hate us. Crixville said with horror in his voice. Hatred requires emotion, and these humans had turned that part of themselves off completely. The cadets sat frozen in their seats, unable to process what they were hearing. I survived because I hid beneath the bodies of my fallen comrades. Krigsmal admitted without shame. I lay there for hours, listening to human boots walking past, too terrified to move or breathe. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found Vethros Prime completely silent. 30,000 Velorian soldiers had been stationed there. Less than 200 survived. High Command finally understood their mistake, Crixville said. They had awakened something in humanity that could not be stopped by military force. The humans had developed these terrible weapons and tactics long ago, but they had locked them away. They had written laws forbidding their use. They had taught their children that some methods of war were too cruel even for enemies. But we killed their children, Crixville continued. And when we did that, we gave them permission to become what they had always feared they could be. He looked at the cadets with eyes that begged them to understand. Humans are not the most numerous species in the galaxy, he said. They are not the largest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. He paused before delivering his final point. But they are the only species we have ever encountered that actively chooses to limit its own capacity for destruction, he declared. They build weapons they refuse to use. They develop tactics they forbid their soldiers from learning. They deliberately make themselves weaker because they fear what they might become. The training hall was completely silent. The galaxy fears human kindness because it means they care about the lives of others, Crixville concluded. But the galaxy should fear the absence of that kindness far more. Because when humans stop caring, nothing in the universe can stand against them. He took a deep breath before continuing. That is why we made peace, he said. That is why the Velorian Empire, with all its fleets and armies, chose to surrender to a species half our size. A cadet raised a trembling hand. How? She asked. How did the war end after all that death? Crixval smiled for the first time since entering the training hall. That is the most important part of the story, he answered. Let me tell you about Dr. Han Su-min and the choice that saved us all. Why we made peace. The cadets sat in exhausted silence as Crixville prepared to finish his tale. They had heard stories of human ferocity and human sacrifice, human endurance and human rage, and they could not imagine how such a war could end in anything but total destruction. After the fall of Vethros Prime and the other military worlds, High Command prepared for the final battle, Crixville explained. They believed the humans would push forward until the Empire was completely destroyed. Emergency orders went out across all remaining fleets. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon was called to defend the homeworld. The Velorian people prepared to die fighting because surrender seemed impossible after everything that had happened. But the human fleets did not advance, Crixville said. They stopped at the edge of our territory and waited in perfect silence once again. Days passed without any attack. High Command grew confused and paranoid, unable to understand why the humans had paused when victory was within their reach. And then a small transport ship requested permission to approach the homeworld. It carried a single passenger, Crixville told the cadets, a human female named Dr. Han Su-min, who claimed to be an ambassador for peace. The admiral suspected a trap. They believed the ship might be carrying weapons of unimaginable destruction. Some demanded that it be destroyed before it could reach the planet. But the High Council overruled them, desperate for any chance to end the slaughter. Dr. Han landed on the steps of the council chamber in the heart of the capital city. She walked alone through crowds of Velorians who stared at her with a mixture of hatred and fear. She was small even by human standards, Crixville remembered. A woman of perhaps 50 years with gray in her dark hair and no weapons anywhere on her body. The council received her in their great hall, surrounded by guards who could have killed her in an instant if she made any threatening move. She stood before the most powerful leaders of the Valorian Empire and showed no fear at all. "I bring a message from humanity," she said in a calm and gentle voice, "and a choice that will determine the future of your species." The council demanded to know her terms of surrender. Dr. Han shook her head sadly. "I am not here to discuss surrender," she replied. "Surrender implies winners and losers, and I believe we can achieve something better than that." She pulled a small device from her pocket, and every guard in the room raised their weapons. But the device was only a projector that displayed images in the air before her. "These are human children playing on Neutral Station 7, she said, and the images showed small humans running and laughing in a public space. Then the image changed. "These are Valorian children playing in the same location," she continued, and the council saw young Valorians of various ages sharing the space with the human young ones. "This image was taken yesterday," Dr. Han explained. "Despite the war, despite everything that has happened, children of both species are growing up together on neutral territory." She looked at each council member in turn. "Our children do not hate each other," she said. "They have not yet learned the fear and anger that drives their parents to kill." The images continued to change, showing humans and Valorians working together, studying together, even celebrating festivals together on the neutral stations. "Humanity can destroy your empire," Dr. Han admitted without any pride in her voice. "We have proven that already, and we have the weapons to finish what we started." She paused to let those words settle. "But we do not want to," she continued. "We never want this war, and we certainly do not want to become the monsters that total victory would require us to become." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You killed our children on the Morning Star," Dr. Han said, and her voice finally showed a trace of emotion. "And yes, we responded with fury that shocked even ourselves." She took a deep breath before continuing. "But revenge does not bring back the dead," she declared. "It only creates more grief, more orphans, more parents who will never hold their children again." She deactivated the projector and stood in silence for a long moment. "Humanity offers you a choice," she finally said. "We can be your greatest allies, sharing technology and resources and the best parts of our cultures, building a future where human and Valorian children grow up together without fear." Her eyes hardened slightly. "Or we can be your final enemy," she warned. "A force that will not stop until one species or the other is completely gone from the galaxy." She spread her hands in a gesture of openness. "We would rather build than destroy," she concluded. "We would rather be remembered as friends than as conquerors. And we would rather your children and ours grow up wondering why their ancestors ever fought at all." The council debated for 3 days after her speech. Some demanded that the war continue until humanity was crushed. Others argued that such victory was impossible against an enemy that had already proven its terrible strength. In the end, the choice was clear. "We chose peace," Crixvold told the cadets. "Not because we were afraid of human weapons, though we were, but because Dr. Han showed us what the alternative could be." He smiled, and for the first time, the expression seemed genuine. "Humans are terrifying because they are capable of destruction beyond anything we can imagine," he said. "But they are wonderful because they choose not to use that capability." He looked at his missing arm, the one that Sergeant Park Ji-Yan had taken from him so many years ago. "She visited me in the hospital after the treaty was signed," he admitted. And several cadets gasped in surprise. "She apologized for my arm and brought me a gift from Earth. A bottle of something called whiskey that she said helps with bad memories." Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension that had built throughout his tale. "We exchange letters now," Crixvold continued. "She tells me about her family and her garden, and I tell her about my grandchildren and my retirement plans." He straightened to his full height and addressed the cadets one final time. "If you ever face humans in battle," he commanded, "pray that they still believe you deserve mercy. He began walking toward the exit. Because if they decide you do not deserve mercy, he added over his shoulder, nothing in the galaxy will save you. The cadets rose to their feet in respect as he passed. At the door, Krigsville paused and looked back at them. But if you meet humans in peace, he concluded with a warm smile, you will find no better friends anywhere among the stars. He left the training hall, and the cadets remained standing in silence for a long time afterward, each of them changed forever by the tales they had heard.